pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You want to do the, can I do the moment of silence?
Go ahead. Mr. Gill wants to do the moment of silence.
And while we observe the moment of silence, I want us to remember Army Specialist Corey Kowal, who died Sunday in Afghanistan. Corey was a graduate of Siegel High School and is well thought of at the school. It certainly would be appropriate for us to remember him and the sacrifice he and his family made for the country. I tell you, there were a couple of heart-wrenching, painful stories in the DNJ, and clearly the dad has, thinks the kid's the greatest kid of all time, and may very well be. It's just so sad to see somebody have to go through that. It's just terrible. But anyway, remember that family and Corey as we observe a moment of silence.
Thank you. Approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's approval of the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor, let me know by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Okay. We don't have any visitors.
No.
My computer's not doing what it's supposed to do here. All right, spotlight on education, I guess, Mr. Gill. No, we got the appointments of the TLN and the FRN, and we've said that Mr. Blair will do that. So is there any question about that? Okay. All right, spotlight on education.
Okay, Curriculum and Instruction Department will preview changes in report cards for K2. The goal is to provide parents more specific curriculum information so that teachers and parents can unite in targeting instruction for students. If you recall, we talked about this last spring, and we'll turn it over to Mr. Odom so he can introduce the presenters and comment as appropriate. We'll set up the document camera. I'd like to do something to contrast for you, if you could. Currently, last year, if you had a student in second grade, this is our second grade report card from last year. If you were a parent at home and looking at your child's math progress last year, what would you know? Now, here it is. Understands math concepts and math computation skills. And you received E, U, S, whatever for this. The new report card that will be rolled out in a couple of weeks will look like this. As a parent, if you would like to be a partner and help your child in mathematics, and the same is true for English language arts and some other subjects too, does this specifically tell you some of the information that you need? For example, compares and orders multi-digit numbers up to 1,000. Now, when parents get this report card the first time, obviously all of these will not be completed because this will be things that's filled out as we go through the school year. So some of them will be marked the first 6 weeks. There'll be some additional ones marked the second 6 weeks, and so forth from there on out. But our goal in creating the new report cards is to let parents be our partner, encourage them to help us with the education of their child, and we think this will do that. I know you're thinking, well, why haven't you done this before now? Well, a couple of reasons. We've been looking at it for 2 or 3 years, and one of the things that we found, we knew the state was having all new standards, so we really needed to wait until the new standards are in place, because this report card is based on the new standards that started with the 2009-10 school year. I'm going to ask a couple of people from instruction to come up for a moment, if they will. This is Lisa Bogle and Linda Pritchard. Lisa is the elementary coordinator, and Linda Pritchard is our elementary specialist. I want them to tell you how we arrived at the product that you're looking at.
Well, just to give you a little bit of background knowledge, the purpose of the new report cards, as Mr. Odom has already said, is to just provide our parents with more detailed feedback regarding our students' progress toward the standards. And if you're not aware of curriculum standards, what they are is they define at each grade level what the students know and what they should be able to do. And what we're doing on this card is we're reporting to the parents the student's proficiency level of each one of those standards based upon a scoring rubric, which you will find at the top of each one of those report cards. Linda's going to talk to you a little bit more about why the change.
Well, the timing was right. The teachers were asking for something that was more aligned with what they were teaching right now. And as Mr. Odom said, the new standards are now in place, and we have the PLC teams, the professional learning communities in place where the grade levels are working, getting their teams aligned to all be teaching what is best for students and to teach the new standards. And we're using the data and the best practices that are available to help reflect what students need to move forward and what is best for students to learn. And we got to develop this and make it all align correctly. The process we used was to get a steering committee, and we did this last year, and it was made up of principals, teachers, and some county central office committee members. And we got grade level teams were formed, and there were representatives from all 24 elementary schools. We have 25 now, but this was last spring. And every one of the 24 elementary schools sent at least one member to be on a committee, And the members of the original steering committee were the members that led the committees as they met. And we met multiple times. And it was quite a task. And the way that we began to get all that together, Lisa's going to tell you about it.
What we did was we asked each of those grade level team members to bring their essential learnings that they had defined through their PLC teams at the school level. And what that means when I say essential learnings is we're talking about a grade level team of teachers sitting down and looking at the whole curriculum, all of the whole curriculum standard for that grade level, and defining some key points that are the most essential items that those students will need to know in order to move on and be successful at the next grade level. So we asked each one of those teachers to bring their essential learnings from their school level, and then we went through a process of looking at those district-wide and categorizing those into different groups. And then what the team did, we took each grade level team, divided it up into two groups. The language arts and math group worked together, and they took the system-wide essential learnings and narrowed those down. And then we had a math group. And once we defined those, we switched groups and checked each other's work, comparing that back to the curriculum standards themselves. So this is a work in progress. It is a good move for us. It is going to allow our parents to be better partners with us, defining what their students are responsible for learning at that grade level. We recognize the fact that it's not perfect, that at the end of this school year, actually before school is out, we're going to ask schools to submit to us revisions that they would like for the committee to consider, and we're going to consider those revisions before our next printing for the fall of the next school year. Does anyone have any questions for us? We've put in your packets there samples of the previous report cards as well as the new ones. And then on our website, we have a frequently asked questions document that I also put in your packet for you. For parents, that's under our teacher and parent tab on our RCS webpage. And also there's a PowerPoint at that same place on the webpage that we use to train our principals and our teachers, and parents can have access to that as well. That will help further explain it. Yeah, this is a K2. The standards-based report card is actually for grades K through 2. There are some systems who do it beyond grade 2, But this was a good place for us to start, and in your packets, I also included for you the report card for 3.5 because there were a few revisions there as well.
In my day, the teacher had a grade book, and they would average the scores and then transfer them to the report card. What does the paperwork look like from the teacher's aspect, from moving that grade to this report card with all of these different areas, and how much of it is subjective?
Okay. Well, you know, all grading can be subjective to some point.
Yes, ma'am.
But the steering committee that developed the rubric, if you look at that, there are some key terms there on the rubric that will help the teacher to define the student's proficiency level of that standard. Words like consistently and independently, or like if a student is at a level of 2, it might mean that student needs help from the teacher, or they are currently developing the skill. They haven't reached mastery yet, but they're working towards. What the work will look like is over the 6 weeks period, and we're not really looking in terms of grades anymore. We're assessing a student's level of proficiency on a standard. So we're not looking at whether it's a 96 or an 86. We're looking at that student's level of mastery toward that standard. So what it might look like is this. During the 6 weeks, if you were teaching double-digit addition, and the teacher has introduced the skill, she's given the students time for independent practice, and now it's time to assess the skill. The student may or may not have performed that skill at a level, well, let me back up. The teacher would look at her rubric and mark the level of proficiency based upon those key terms in the rubric. The student might have scored a 2 at that time. So during the 6 weeks, they would continue with their interventions, trying to move that student towards a 3, which is proficient. So whatever the child is going to get on the report card will be the rubric level, the last rubric level that the teacher has assessed the student, I'm sorry. For example, if the student had a 1, later they made a 2, but before the end of the 6 weeks they made a 3, then that student would get a 3 on the report card because at this time that's their level of proficiency toward that skill. I'm sorry, that was a lot. I did the best I could.
Thank you.
And a 4 is the level that is way beyond, it's above grade level. So, or it's something that not many students are gonna achieve a 4.
Mr. Hodge?
Just curious, how much longer will it take a teacher to fill this out versus what they were using before?
It is gonna take longer, but it is, once teachers get used to it, it won't be that much longer because it is aligned with what they're teaching and what they're doing, and you can assess very quickly. The other,
Of course, Linda, unlike a middle or high schooler, they don't have 150 kids or 120. They got 20 max, so that makes it a little easier to swallow.
exactly, and then they did ask for it because it was not, what the old report card did not match what they were teaching, so it really wasn't very useful.
What I want to add to that is we've suggested to each school at their grade level PLC teams that they look at these standards that have been defined on the report card and divide those up amongst the 6 weeks period so that you will not be assessing each one of those things each 6 weeks. Now, you might have a student the first 6 weeks who never got past that level 2 because you need to continue providing intervention. So that student may be assessed because you would want to continue the learning process there. But if the student who's made a 3 and they mastered it, you wouldn't have to assess that anymore unless you wanted to go back and revisit, which obviously we do want to do to help us be prepared for the test. But actually, if a student is reaching the proficiency level, you might only mark it one time.
Dr. Hart?
Oh, first, I'd like to say, as a parent of a second grader and a fourth grader, I love this. I would much rather have the detailed information. I know it's got to be more on the teacher, but I appreciate them being willing to do it. You said that, is it our choice, the system's choice, whether or not to expand this 3rd to 5th or wherever to some higher grades, or what are the issues involved in that?
It is. The thing that you run into is you go up in the grades, the number of standards, state standards and skills get rather lengthy. So at some point, you probably, it's just
not
almost too
feasible.
much, you know, that what you do. And especially, as Mr. Gill says, is those teachers will go some kind of departmentalization, and they're doing 150 students a day or something like that. This had really become burdensome. One of the things we're doing in one school is piloting quarters. And if that's successful, that would reduce the number of times teachers would have to mark this. Also, it'd give you more time to do the assessments and do the interventions. You know, see, it kind of begins to make sense when you look at it in that thing. I want to point out something to you, though. We've been telling you the new standards are tougher, and what we have on your screen is your second grade. Look at some of the skills: algebra, geometry and measurement, data, probability and statistics. It's there, folks. The new state standards, it's there. Much more rigorous.
And so in terms of the quarter, the 4 grading periods rather than 6, I thought we decided to do that, but it was just a pilot.
It's piloted at one school to get the feedback and go. Stewart's Creek Elementary is piloting.
And they're doing a midterm assessment too, right? I mean, that was part of it, as I recall.
They were,
Correct.
Yeah.
for the feedback of
Yeah.
how parents, you know, responded. And
Well, I mean, to give parents an idea rather than wait 9 weeks to.
Yeah, actually, we required that they submit that midterm report card. And I mean, it's pretty detailed. So I mean, a parent won't go 9 weeks without
Yeah.
some pretty pertinent information. Right.
And Mr. Blair, I want to add one more thing to the question I tried my best to give to you. Part of the PLC team approach is that teachers look at students' work and they talk about how their students are performing. They look at the question that was asked on the assessment. So that's another thing that we've asked our teachers to do is whatever the skill is that you're working on that 6 weeks, if they bring some samples of student work together as a PLC team and discuss the progress of the students so that they would have that as some reference. Because in the beginning, it is going to be a little bit different for us to look in this term, but we're actually trying to stay really focused on what the skill is and what the level of proficiency is for that student toward the skill. So, and that's how we're going to use our rubric. I don't know if that clears it up, Andy, but.
Mr. Did you have another question, Mr.
Yes,
Blair?
sir. The new Terra Nova that we're going to be using this year, is it comparing us nationwide or still statewide?
It's some of both because the standards, because of NAEP and some other things that's going on, the skills, the standards that were pulled down are some of those that's national. The reporting as far as their normal curve equivalent percentiles will still be state, and that's under No Child Left Behind because each state had to have the standards. One of the state people made the comment that Tennessee may now have the second toughest standards in the nation. We'll see. But it's being recognized as really selecting some tough ones. I think we'll do well. It's going to take a few years to get there, though. I heard Dr. Webb this morning in a speech that he made. People have been saying, will there be more schools on target? He said, you betcha. So I think you're going to see a change initially when this happens.
So as far as the cry that we have not met truth in advertising in our scores, this will resolve that issue.
I think so. We'll see.
Any other questions? This kind of goes along with this. It doesn't necessarily go along with the report cards, but I did want to ask you a question. She mentioned the PLCs. Mr. Odom, you made a talk on that today, and I understand you did an outstanding job out there. You were the keynote address is what I've heard. For the public, and I know that some of them have heard it before, but some of them haven't, can you just briefly explain what PLCs are and how that fits into everything?
A PLC is a professional learning community, is what the letters stand for, basically. And what we do with a professional learning community, we take teachers in a building, and typically if it's third grade, the third grade teachers would be a collaborative team, fourth grade would be a collaborative team. As you move up to middle and high school, it tends to be the math teachers. The Algebra 1 teachers would be a collaborative team. The English 1 teachers would be a collaborative team. They look at the state standards. They devise common assessments. They give this common assessment at the same time, bring the scores back, do what we call item analysis, breakdowns, to see which skills the students may not be mastering. to identify individual students that need more time and support, is the term that we use for that. They also identify what skill may need to be retaught. This is where teachers learn from each other too, because you run into situations where one group of students may be at the 70th percentile and another class that might be at 40, then teachers begin to exchange, what skill or strategy did you use that's working very well for you? Your idea is if you can raise everybody, then that's the best way to go. So what we're doing is the collaborative team is the background for this. Bill Taylor, I think, made a statement which is individuals win games, teams win championships, and that's what we're trying to do.
Now, Mr. Gill has really pushed this in Rutherford County, and it's an outstanding thing that we're doing here, and it's working. And I guess the point that I want to make, he needs to be, commended for that. And also, the teachers in Rutherford County that are cooperating, and also, we're a leader in this area, are we not?
I think so for this area, for sure. Mr. Gill puts it in principals' contracts as part of their performance. But I will tell you this is our third year, really, to be into this. If we didn't do a thing up here in this office, most of these schools would keep going. You're right, Mr. Gill? Mm-hmm. Because those new teachers and people that come in finally have got some support. You're not the only one making a decision about an intervention. You're not by yourself out there. You've got a team of people that's helping you. What's the best way to teach this? What's the best way to do the intervention? How can we help each other? And that, it will actually, should actually, and I think we're beginning to see it reduce the number of teachers that leave their profession. You see people leave profession very early on, and one of the primary reasons is I was just overwhelmed in dealing with it. And this type of support, see, our principals have organized it into, they have common planning times. So you'll have, in an elementary school now, all fifth grade teachers maybe have a common planning time, and they meet during the week to do this also.
Thank you. Just a quick comment. Bob Aker at the university, many of us had him as an instructor, and Rick DeFore really kind of pioneered the PLCs, and they travel the country along with a team of people now and make big dollars teaching PLCs, the effectiveness of those, how you implement them, so on and so forth. Anyway, Dr. Aker has been over here 4 or 5 times and volunteered his time to help train our principals, and so that it would percolate down through the schools and through the ranks. And, I want to first thank him and salute him for doing that. Secondly, we realize it's an ongoing process, and, there are challenges each and every year, and there are a lot of uncertainties, but I really feel like we're inching closer and closer towards making them efficient in almost all the schools. And someday, probably after you and I retire, we'll really see the, we'll reap the rewards of what we've done here. So we're pretty fired up about it.
Any other questions?
I just want to say thank you for giving us this opportunity, because I really do think that this will greater define for parents their students' progress. Sometimes you're talking about subjectivity and grading. Lots of things can go into grading sometimes, even behaviors, or whether you turn something in or give you an extra point for bringing an extra Coke bottle to school for a science project. So this kind of takes away from that. This focuses on those skills and how they're progressing towards mastery of that. So we really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Lisa, that's the most I've ever seen you talk.
I can do it.
Good job. Thank you.
Number 9, facilities.
A, amendment to the campus school agreement between MTSU and Rutherford County Board of Education. The current custodians at campus school are employed by Middle Tennessee State University, and the university is reimbursed by Rutherford County Schools for the service. Assistant Superintendent Mr. Gary Clardy and Mr. Jeff Sandvik have reviewed the reimbursements and determined that it is feasible to employ 2.5 custodians for the same amount. This will give Principal Bridgman greater control over her school's cleaning process and better communications with her custodians. An amendment to the latest MTSU Rutherford County Board of Education agreement is attached, stating that Rutherford County Board of Education will be responsible for hiring and funding of the custodians, with the exception of leaving Jimmy Stokes in his current position as custodian and continuing to fund his salary at the university's expense. Mr. Jeff Reed, Board Attorney, has reviewed the amendment. I'm going to recommend that we do that, but there'll be no additional cost to the board. And as it says, Principal Bridgman will have significantly more control. So recommend that you approve the amendment to the agreement between MTSU and the Rutherford County Board of Education as presented.
You've heard the recommendation.
So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Oh, Donald, did you have something?
I just had a quick question. They're on the same salary schedule as all of the other custodians in the county?
That's right, it is, Jeff. Thought so, yep.
Any other questions? That was a good question.
Yeah.
All in favor of the motion, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. B.
Fair Brothers property. In 2002, Charles and Fred Fair donated 35.11 acres off Epps Mill Road to the Board of Education, contemplating the construction of a new school to accommodate projected growth in the area. The deed to the board provided that the property would revert to the Fair Brothers if construction for a school was not commenced by July 1st, 2009. As no school has been commenced, the reversion clause has been triggered in the deed. There are no plans for a school to be built on the property in the near future. Although title to the property has already technically vested back into the Fair Brothers' name, the Fair Brothers have requested a warranty deed be executed by the board to convey the property back to them for tax reasons. Fair Brothers have offered to pay $50,000 in exchange for the board executing the deed, and recommend that you approve the board executing a warranty deed conveying the 35.11 acre parcel on Epps Mill Road back to Charles Fair and Fred Fair, Fair Brothers property in exchange for $50,000.
You've heard the recommendation.
Second.
Have a second, okay. Any discussion? No discussion, all in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes.
Just a quick comment, and Mr. Donald Jernigan alluded to this the other night. We just didn't have we hate to give land, not take advantage of land when it's donated to us, but there just wasn't a need at this time to build anything there. Who knows what it'd be like in 10 or 15 years at that site. So that's, we just couldn't simply throw a school up there when we didn't need it there yet.
Don't we still have some property on Hoover's Gap Road from the other that was
We
given
do. We
to
have,
us? So that-
land for a high school there. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, I'm talking about on further out, the property that
Oh,
was.
yes.
So
Yes.
it's in the neighborhood
Yeah.
to take, so we
Yeah,
still have.
Who were those developers, Mr. Clardy? You remember that they indicated when it was developed, they'd give us land for an elementary school?
I don't remember the name, but that
Yeah.
was executed, so.
Right. But there is an arrangement when they build out this particular subdivision that they'll donate land for construction of an elementary school.
Yes,
Right.
correct.
No charge to the board.
Any other discussion? Okay, number 10.
Resolution. The Rutherford County Board of Education urges the General Assembly to revise Tennessee Code Annotated 49-5-409 entitled Teachers Continuing Contract Law Termination of Contract. And the rationale is, this section requires that non-tenured teachers continue in service until they have received notice of their dismissal or failure of reelection. Failure to reelect notice must be delivered to teachers prior to April the 15th of each school year. Once a teacher has received this notice, their performance levels often decrease drastically. In some cases, teachers do not return to work after receiving this notification. The deadline, as it is now, creates multiple problems for school systems. Most importantly, state-mandated achievement tests are administered after the delivery of the notice. Additionally, the need for substitute teachers increases once the notices are delivered. This can result in a substantial expense for school systems. This deadline creates a hardship for school systems and compromises student achievement. The needs of students would be better served if the statute reflected a May 15th deadline, and we're recommending that you approve the resolution as presented.
You've heard the recommendation.
So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. And Mr. Blair, you will defend this down there if it needs to be defended, will you not?
Yes, sir.
Okay, number 11, general discussion by board. Anybody have anything to discuss? Terry?
I just, if it's at all possible, next meeting we have, board meeting, I'd like to look at, go back and look at the McFadden admission policy, look at those, items. There's one that's, I've been bombarded with, and I
You're
just
talking
like-
about you're talking about
The city
McFadden,
county-
not central,
No, just
okay.
McFadden.
Okay.
McFadden. Look at the admission policies on that, because I was always under the understanding it was one way, and come find out it was the other way, and I had to,
yeah, sure.
had put up a lot of,
Okay, certainly. Any other discussion, questions?
We got two important, all of our meetings are important, but two really important meetings next week, one on zoning and one on the building program, two special call meetings.
Any other discussion? All minds at ease?